Arms warriors are master weaponsmiths, overpowering their enemies in the battlefield with both mobility and weapon prowess. This guide for the War Within Season 1 is going to be absolutely beginner-friendly, telling you everything you need to know to succeed in Season 1. However, I will be still going into enough depth that everyone who is a veteran and wants to know their rotation, etc., and all the details will also get everything they need as well. Let's jump straight into it then with the stats and stat priority we are going to be using. So, of course, our main priority is going to be strength, getting a higher and higher eye level or item level, giving us, of course, more strength. Strength equals more damage. The secondary stats, the priority is going to be here. However, unless you're comparing two items of the same eye level, I really wouldn't worry too much. Always getting a higher eye level of gear is generally always just going to be an improvement. Haste increases how quickly we are attacking and our resources. So critical strike, the chance, the higher the percentage, stats on gear, gives you a chance to do more damage and healing. Mastery is actually different for every spec. As an arms warrior, it's deep wounds. Mortal Strike, Colossus Smash, and Blade Storm, a few of our core abilities that I'm going to be showing you in the rotation, inflict deep wounds, dealing a big amount of bleed damage over 12 seconds and increasing the damage our enemies take from us by a higher and higher amount for the more mastery. Then we have Versatility. This increases damage done and any healing that we're doing, while also simultaneously reducing damage taken. And it's just an all-around, pretty basic, great stat. While we're here, let's just look at our set pieces as well for the veterans watching. 2 set, Mortal Strike and Cleave, increase the damage of our next Overpower. And the 4 set for Season 1 in the War Within, when Overpower has its cooldown reset by Tactician, your next Mortal Strike or Cleave has its damage increased by 10% and Critical Strike chance increased by 10%, and that can stack twice. If you're not sure what those are, don't worry. I'll be fully explaining it in the rotation shortly. So now we're going to look through some of the utilities and defensives that you have available to you as a warrior. And yes, that does mean these are going to be available in any spec you want. So do check out the playlist on my channel because I have done all warrior specs for you. Now, there are, of course, always going to be more utilities that you can use. Each class has quite a lot of them, but these ones are the most important ones, or the kind of ones you're going to use the most. And I do always recommend that once you're familiar with the game or with your class or spec, etc., that you go into the spellbook and just have a look through at what else you do have available. So the ones I want to talk through with you today are first Pummel. Pummels the target, interrupting spellcasting and preventing any spell in that school from being cast. So if your enemy is casting a spell, you can see here that Boomkin was casting Full Moon, and now they're casting Sunfire. Well, basically, that's going to interrupt that spell cast. It's otherwise known as a kick. Kick or interrupt is what it's known as in World of Warcraft. And that is a really, really useful ability, especially in, PvP, especially in Mythic Plus. You're going to be doing a lot of interrupting wherever possible, and it is only on a 15-second cooldown. Then we have Piercing Howl, snares all enemies within 12 yards, reducing their movement speed by 70% for 8 seconds. A massive slow that we can put on nearby enemies. Then we have Hamstring here. It's going to cost you 10 rage, which is our main warrior resource, maims the enemy for X amount of damage, reducing their movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. Again, another slow that we can use on our enemy. Over on the right, then, we've got some things that are more affecting us and our allies in a positive way. The first up being Bitter Immunity on a 3-minute cooldown. Restores 20% of your health instantly and removes any diseases, poisons, or curses that are affecting you. So if someone poisons you, you can press this button, restore some health, and just wipe out that poison immediately. A really great defensive cooldown we have there as a warrior. Rallying Cry. Let loose a Rallying Cry, granting all party or raid members 10% temporary and maximum health for 10 seconds, boosting up our raid party and ourselves with more health. If you know the boss or whoever you're fighting is going to do a big, massive old damage cooldown. This could really help bump up your health temporarily and increase your kind of resistance against that boss. And then we have Battle Shouts. This has been around for a long time, but it's still, of course, here in the War Within. Increases the attack power of you, your party, and raid members by 5% for a whole entire hour. You should always be using this at all times. You can see it on the buff bar up here. It's up for an entire hour, simply increasing our attack power by 5%. You know, warriors and any other kind of classes that go off attack power are going to benefit massively from this buff that we as a warrior can bring to the table. And those are the main cooldowns and sort of utilities and defensives that we can use as a warrior. Again, if you are a complete beginner, do look through the spellbook here once you're more comfortable with the spec and rotation and see what else we have available. All of these will be coming from the warrior tree. So if you're not actually sure, on the right here, we have the fury tree. And then on the left, we have the warrior tree. Now, ignore this one on the right. This isn't actually set up for any guides or anything. This is just a template to show you the warrior tree. But the warrior tree on the left will not change in any spec. So if you are in arms, fury, or protection, this warrior tree over here will always be the same. You can, of course, change your talents depending on which spec you are in, though. But you do have access to all of these, no matter the specialization you are currently in. So now let's look at the exciting bit, which is the rotation. Now, for both Raiding and Mythic Plus, we are going to go with Slayer because it just comes out on top. Now, starting off with, yes, the raid rotation, you can see that the talents are slightly different in Raiding and Mythic Plus. One of the main changes is we get Skull Splitter here. So let's have a look at what abilities we're using, when and why, really. So the first thing we're going to do is use Rend as our top priority to apply Rend to the target. That is going to be basically a bleed on our target. Wounds the target, causing a bleed over 21 seconds. Keep that up at all times. Then we're going to use Thunderous Roar. Roar explosively, dealing damage to enemies within 12 yards, causing them to bleed again over 16 seconds. Then we're going to use Avatar and immediately use Colossus Smash. You can see Avatar is on a 1.5 cooldown, Colossus Smash is on 45 seconds, meaning for every 2 Colossus Smashes, you can use 1 Avatar, if that makes sense. Transform into Colossus, dealing more damage and generating some rage, rage being our main resource. And then Colossus Smash, smashing an enemy's armor, dealing damage, and increasing how much damage you deal to them. So what we're doing is we're increasing the damage we do, and then increasing the damage taken from us on our enemy. If we have marked for execution, we're going to use Execute. And there it is, waiting for that to happen. So use Execute if you do get a proc on it here, as you can therefore see. We're going to get sudden deaths here. Your attacks have a chance to make your next execute cost no rage, be usable on any target regardless of their health, and deal damage as if you spent 40 rage. Basically, use execute at this part in the priority list if you see it pop up. Then we have on the hero talents here, Opportunist. When Overpower has its cooldown reset by Tactician, your next Overpower deals more damage and more critical strike. This is our Overpower here. Overpower the enemy, dealing damage that cannot be blocked, dodged, or parried. Increases the damage of your next mortal strike by 30%, and that can stack twice. And then here is Tactician. You've got a chance per rage spent on attacks to reset the remaining cooldown on Overpower. So whenever you do get that proc on your Opportunist, we're going to be using Overpower at that point. After that, we're going to be using Mortal Strike on cooldown, and now you can see that proc has happened there. There is our Opportunist, and that is when we're going to be using our Overpower. Of course, we then go back up to use our Execute as it's procced, and we basically keep doing that. We keep going back up the priority list until we can use something. So again, use Mortal Strike on cooldown, a Vicious Strike dealing damage and reducing the effectiveness of any healing on the target. Then we're going to use Skull Splitter on cooldown, bash an enemy's skull, dealing physical damage, and it causes your rend and deep wounds on the target to bleed out 100% faster for 10 seconds. So remember, we are going to be keeping up our rend, etc. on the target at all times. After that, Then use Execute whenever you can. So if they're, low health, etc. Because what Execute does is it attempts to finish off a foe, causing damage based on rage spent. Only usable, usually, on enemies with under 35% health. Then we're going to use Blade Storm, even in single target here. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. Become an unstoppable storm of destructive force, striking all nearby enemies for damage, and you're immune to any movement impairing effects. After that, just use any remaining overpower stacks that you can, and Slam is going to be the filler. So use Rend and keep up that bleed on your target. Use Thunderous Roar to keep up the bleed. Then use Avatar and Colossus Smash. Use any procs you get on Execute. Use any overpower procs you get. Use Mortal Strike on cooldown, use Skull Splitter on cooldown, use Execute whenever you can at this point, use Blade Storm on cooldown, use any other stacks of Overpower, and then Slam if you have nothing else to press. And that is basically the raid single target rotation for the War Within. For Mythic Plus, the rotation is going to change a little bit. You can see quite a few talents are changing over here. One is we're getting Thunderclap, and we're also getting Cleave here as well. So basically, what we're going to be doing as our number one priority in AoE situations or Mythic Plus in the War Within is going to be Thunderclap. And what you'll notice is that Thunderclap is actually going to apply Rend to the target. Blasts all enemies for physical damage and reduces their movement speed. If you have Rend, Thunderclap affects 5 nearby targets with Rend. So this is our AoE version of getting Rend out. Then we're going to use Sweeping Strikes on cooldown. For 15 seconds, your single target damaging abilities hit an additional target for 75% of the damage. We're going to use Thunderous Roar, Avatar, and Colossus Smash the same as before. But then we're going to use Cleave and use that on cooldown, striking all enemies in front of you for damage, inflicting deep wounds. Cleave will consume your Overpower effect to deal increased damage. Deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. We do also have this talent here, Collateral Damage. When Sweeping Strikes ends, your next Cleave or Whirlwind deals more damage for each ability used during Sweeping Strikes that damage that target. You can see we can use that here on our Cleave, which is then empowering, we've got our Overpower. And you do want to use Overpower during your Sweeping Strikes at this point in the rotation. After that, we're still using Blade Storm. We're still using Execute whenever we get any procs, which we are if we come out of Blade Storm. And then during Sweeping Strikes as well, we want to make sure we're using Mortal Strike. And then we're just using Overpower, any remaining stacks, Thunderclap if it's off cooldown, and then again, Mortal Strike if we literally can. So again, use Thunderclap to get your Rend out. Use Sweeping Strikes, then use Thunderous Roar, Avatar, and Colossus Smash. Then use Cleave, use Overpower, and also Mortal Strike if you are in Sweeping Strikes. Use Blade Storm on cooldown, use Execute when you can, use Thunderclap if you're kind of this far down and have nothing else to press, and then Mortal Strike again if you have nothing else to press. And that is pretty much it for the Mythic Plus part. Now let's have a look at the hero talents. So for this arms build, we are going with Slayer, the hero talents, and what I do want to say quickly is that these are already involved in the rotation I have shown you. This is not additional to it. However, I do want to just kind of go through the hero talents and, why we're taking Slayer, etc. So your attacks against your primary target have a high chance to overwhelm their defenses and trigger a Slayer's Strike. What that Slayer's Strike will do is a huge amount of damage and applying marked for execution, increasing the damage they take from your next execute by 15%, and that will stack. So it's heavily going around Execute there. Imminent Demise on the left. Every 3 Slayer strikes, you gain Sudden Death. Using Sudden Death accelerates your next Blade Storm, striking an additional target. Additional time. Blade Storm's total duration isn't changed. You heal for 15% dealt of the damage dealt for Sudden Death. And Marked for Execution increases the critical strike chance and damage of your next Execute. So Execute is just insane damage here. Each strike of Blade Storm applies Overwhelmed to all enemies affected, but doing increased damage you deal to them by 1% for 20 seconds, and that will stack 12 times, up to 12%. Then we have a choice node, Culling Cyclone. Each strike of Blade Storm deals additional damage split evenly, or your next Mortal Strike after Blade Storm ends deals 50% additional damage. I quite like Culling Cyclone, it's just simpler. Reap the Storm, Mortal Strike and Cleave have a 20% chance to cause you to unleash a flurry of steel, striking all nearby enemies and replying Overwhelmed, reducing damage beyond 8 targets. Another choice one, I go for Vicious Agility. Heroic Leap reduces the cooldown of Charge, and Charge reduces the cooldown of Heroic Leap. So just some extra mobility there. Then we have Opportunist. When Overpower has its cooldown reset by Tactician, your next Overpower deals additional damage and 30% additional critical damage. Again, this is all passively happening. You don't really need to worry about it. Overpower damage is increased. And lastly, when you execute a target that you've marked for execution, you both reduce the cooldown of Blade Storm by 5 seconds and apply 2 stacks of Overwhelmed to the target per stack of marked execution consumed. And you can now use Pummel and Stormbolt while Blade Storming. So you can use it at the same time, which is actually really, really nice. Looking at the consumables and enchants, etc., that we're going to be using in the War Within. First up is Nerubian Gem Weavers. These are the new ways to add sockets to your gear from the weekly Great Vault. So you can put one on your head, wrist, and waist. On the neck, ring and ring 2, we can use a magnificent jeweler setting to add 2 sockets to each slot for jewelry. Then on the enchants, Chant of Winged Grace, giving full damage reduction and also avoidance on the cloak. Chest is Crystalline Radiance, that gives primary stat. Avoidance on the wrist. Defender's Armor Kit on the legs. Scout's March on the boots, which give, movement speed. And then Mastery enchants on your rigs. Then it's going to be Authority of the Depths on your weapons, which basically is, it's pretty cool actually. It means that we're going to apply darkness to our weapon, and periodically that is going to do some damage, and it can also stack up to 3 times. For the actual consumables, Flask of Alchemical Chaos is the flask we're going to use. This is going to increase a secondary stat randomly, and it's kind of basically going to cycle. It will increase your secondary stat by 7,600 at the cost of 600 to the other 2. And again, that's going to cycle round. And then we have primary stat feasts, a tempered potion, which will actually give you your other secondary stats that your flask is not currently giving. Healing potion is going to be an Algari healing potion. And then Iron Claw whetstones here. You can see when and why we would be using these depending on weapon type. Crystallized Augment Rune will give strength on your Augment Rune, and then the sockets, the Culminating Blasphemite, basically it's going to give you primary stat, and then it's going to give you critical strike effect, 0.15% for each different coloured gem you have. So we can use an Emerald, Sapphire, Ruby, and Onyx to get the full effect on there. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in The War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in The War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for The War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVUI, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.